So what are some of the challenges when migrating? And one of the things we run into a lot at SSG is companies that have, quite frankly, very old SQL servers running, either out of support or almost out of support versions of SQL Server on out of support versions of Windows. And for whatever reason, in many organizations, there's some hesitancy to upgrade databases. Um, and so, why is that? I think one of the issues is, do we even know what we have, right? Database servers, databases, and more importantly, what are all the applications, users, and things that connect to this, right? What's going to break if we migrate this, if we upgrade this? I think for a lot of organizations, there's a risk reward concern because data is kind of the backbone of most organizations, right? And making big changes to our database environment can be, you know, higher risk, and maybe we don't see the reward or the benefit versus the cost. And in many cases, it comes down to fear, right? I have people tell me all the time, "Oh, we don't like to touch it because every time we do something, it breaks. Something breaks." And that's a technical debt issue. That's a you know IT organization process maturity issue in some cases, but it's very real. So one of the and that's kind of what this original webinar was about is let's address some of those issues. Um, so what we should do, use the opportunity to clean up the environment. Virtually every SQL server out there has old databases, old logins, old jobs, things that are no longer used. One of the things that we see a lot of are things like Windows logins that are mapped to Active Directory accounts that no longer exist, right? So, use the opportunity to just bring the things to your new environment that you actually need to use. Uh, Best practices. One of the things that we do a lot of, we have a project, fixed fee project offering called the Full Stack Health Check, where we basically do a holistic view of your SQL Server environment, everything from infrastructure, hardware, in virtual environments. We'll look at the hypervisor, whether that's Hyper-V, VMware. If you're in the cloud, AWS or Azure, we're going to look at how that's configured, the operating system, the SQL Server, all the way to the queries, right? So, um, just looking at best practices, right? The same things that we do that we recommend for building a new environment, right? Um, again, decommission unused databases, jobs, logins. This is a great opportunity for security hardening, right? If you have an environment where, everyone's a database owner or even worse, everyone's a sysadmin because that was just easier. This is a good opportunity to resolve some of those things. We should approach an upgrade or migration project, and I kind of use those terms interchangeably. Most of the time, the reason we're migrating is because we're upgrading in some way. Uh, we also could be moving to a different data center, migrating to the cloud, but most of the time, it's going to be, we're moving from an older version of SQL Server to a newer version. And we should approach this like any other project. There needs to be an analysis stage, a design stage, and an implementation stage. And along with that, there needs to be testing and more testing and more testing, right? And so that's one of the things we'll talk about in this distributed AG methodology is how, we can kind of create the new environment, migrate everything, and have all of our data there in a writable state so that we can test, right? We can do regression testing. We can use that as a test environment. And then when we get ready to get close to when we're going to actually go live with it, we'll initialize our distributed availability group. It will keep things in sync and we'll do a cutover. So, don't install unnecessary components, right? We see a lot of SQL servers that were just kind of a click, click, click default install. They have SSRS, the installed analysis services, integration services, everything that you possibly could want. And if it's not in use, uh, it's unnecessarily using resources. And it's also, from an attack surface area standpoint, from a security standpoint, it's always better to have, fewer components. So we do not ever recommend in-place upgrades for SQL Server, or operating systems for that matter. It's 2023. Most environments are virtual. Bringing up a new virtual machine and migrating to that is, usually in most environments pretty easy to do in terms of resources. And, even if you want to end up on the same hardware, you can do that with virtual machines, right? And it just, when you upgrade in place, you bring a lot of that mess with you, right? That we talked about wanting to clean up. But B, you don't have a real good rollback option, right? When you do your live production migration, and in that process, you're likely going to have a go no go decision. And if you upgrade in place, your no go to roll back is going to be, in most cases, a lot uglier than it would be if if we're talking about migrating to a new environment. We do not recommend migrating or moving system databases from one environment to another, meaning master, MSDB. Um, you know, we have scripts and tools that allow us to copy all those objects, take care of those things. And that's, again, a much cleaner way to do that. Thinking about what we need to migrate. Right? Now, we obviously think about databases, right? But there's an awful lot of things on a SQL server that you need to keep in mind, besides just the databases. Logins is an obvious one, right? SQL Server agent objects, jobs, alerts, operators. And these three are usually, most people will think of those. But you have things like credentials, your database mail configuration. If you are using replication, how are you going to migrate that? Are you going to have to re-snapshot large publications? What's that going to look like? Do you have extended event sessions that are in place? Are you using linked servers? What are your various sysdoc configurations? And you want to be a little bit careful with this because moving to a new environment, you may not just want to just copy everything as is, but you're certainly going to want to review what you have and make sure that the new environment is configured, as it should be. Some of the less common things, instance level triggers. Those are easy to miss. If you have triggers at the instance level, server audits, maintenance plans, if you're using any kinds of custom endpoints, user objects in the system databases, master or MSDB, is a pretty common one. We build a new environment, we migrate all the user databases, we migrate all the instance level objects, but we had that stored proc or that table in master that we didn't think about. And in general, we don't recommend doing that, but there are cases where those will exist, and you want to make sure you get those. And then any other features that you might be using, policy-based management, resource governor, change data control, right? There's a lot of things that go into a SQL server. And all of this is assuming that this is a dedicated SQL server. There's not a file share on there. There's not, some other application installed, which again, we don't recommend doing, but we know that in the real world, sometimes we have environments that are like that. Don't forget about compatibility levels when you upgrade. So when you restore a database from a down level version of SQL Server to a new version, it is going to upgrade the database files, right? Which is why you can't take a database from SQL Server 2019 and restore it on 2016, for example, right? But it will not upgrade the database compatibility level automatically, right? And that's something that you should do as part of this process, And of course, that comes back to the testing, right? You want to see how that's going to impact your applications. But we see a lot of SQL servers out there with very old compatibility levels that it's obvious that databases have lived for a long time and the compatibility level has never been updated. And there's two issues with that. One is going to be that you are losing access to a lot of functionality and features that we have in newer versions. But two, and we've run into this one as well, if that goes on long enough, eventually you're going to get to a version of SQL Server that compatibility level that you're on is no longer supported, right? And this, again, this slide is from that 2021 webinar. We should add 2022 to this. But you can kind of see that, in 2019, the oldest compatibility level is 100, which was SQL Server 2008, right? So if you have something that's been upgraded from SQL Server 2000, let's say, and we do see those, that's in 80, the most, or even 2005, let's say 90, the newest version of SQL Server you can move that to is 2012, right? So that's another reason we want to make sure that we're taking care of compatibility levels as part of the process.